Behold, it's Natalia. Let's go find some monkeys, shall we?
Would you say sex is like riding a bicycle?
Nothing gets me going like Christmas and wigs. Let's check out this show.
I remember the first creature I beheld. He was a squirrel. His name was Kevin.
I heard you need a DNA sample.
I want to find light and joy in things that bring us together and unite us. And I think science is something that can unite us. Ow. God damn.
There's a world out there, a world that needs to be beheld.
Behold! Okay, welcome back to another episode of Survival of the Filthiest. I'm your host, Natalia Reagan. I'm a biological anthropologist and comedian. And I created this show because what the fuck is happening in this world? Folks, we have a war on science, healthcare, DEI, people of colors, gays, bays, jetways, veterans, queers, engineers, the vax, paperbacks, teachers, creatures, women, and yet folks want to throw money into de-extinction. But is de-extinction really even possible? We're going to get into that. So what better way to resist all this BS than to have scientists, comedians, and advocates and educators who are creating some good trouble come on this show and tell me what they're doing to move this country forward and this world forward, really, rather than 5,876 steps back. And here's a quick reminder to please like, subscribe, and comment, and send questions my way if you have them. And if you want to join my Patreon to help the production of this super illustrious show, feel free to join. And today we're going to be talking about dire wolves and de-extinction and why the dire wolf is not back, folks. I know it's a little confusing and it's disappointing to some folks. I'm going to bring up a slideshow like I do. Hold on one second. We're presenting that slideshow. Thank you. Folks, give it up for Peter. Peter is my wonderful producer making this all happen. We're going to talk to my dear friend, Dr. Adam P. Johnson, in a minute. But first, I just want to set up the story, set the tableau. What are we looking at? Well, Time magazine came out with this article, Crossing Off Extinct, when it comes to the dire wolf, because Colossal, according to them, brought back the dire wolf. But what exactly did they do? And a lot of science, it's very clickbaity. People are coming on saying, oh yeah, we brought it back. Because yes, it's very exciting. We all watch Game of Thrones. Who doesn't like medieval incestual torture porn? But we all saw these science publications say that the dire wolf is back. But folks, is it really back? Quite honestly, what they did is they extracted ancient DNA from a 13,000-year-old dire wolf tooth and a 72,000 inner ear bone, and they basically, sequenced the genome, took out traits that they thought were going to be more dire wolf-like, and taking what they thought was, the closest genetic relative, which would be a gray wolf. We'll get into that in a little bit, why that's not completely correct, and sort of use gene editing to splice in these particular traits to hopefully create this sort of dire wolf gray wolf hybrid. They didn't use a lot of traits. It was about 15 total. So essentially what you're going to get is a genetically modified gray wolf. Now here is baby Remus at 2 months old, itty bitty. There's three pups. There's Remus, Romulus, which are from the story about how Rome was built, that mythology, and Khaleesi, a young female pup. And they use this gene editing to create these creatures. But this brings into a bigger question about de-extinction and what exactly de-extinction is, because we've heard a lot about bringing back the woolly mammoth. And in the case of the woolly mammoth, it would be very similar. It would be taking, say, a mammoth ancient DNA, finding the traits that would make its closest genetic relative, an Asian elephant, more mammoth-like, whether it's long hair, more adipose tissue, so it's chonkier and huskier, and it's just bigger in size. And basically splicing in those traits using CRISPR technology to create sort of a genetically modified Asian elephant. So, and this is actually a photo, or a picture from Colossal about, what would this Arctic elephant look like? But the thing is, we're also using the idea of using Asian elephants, which are endangered, folks, and they live in large herds. So to bring back just one single mammoth or an Asian elephant mammoth hybrid or a genetically modified Asian elephant is kind of cruel. So you're not going to necessarily get a woolly mammoth. You're going to get this sort of, extra fuzzy Asian elephant, which is cool, but at the same time, well, let's look at some of the ethical, questions. Oh, first of all, I want to bring up the fact that they did actually create a woolly mouse, excuse me, not quite a woolly mammoth, but they did splice in traits that made this mouth a little fluffier, But why are we doing this when the world is just getting warmer? We're living in a time of climate change, anthropogenic caused climate change. So why are we bringing back Pleistocene megafauna that thrived during the Ice Age during a time when the Earth is warming? We're also looking at this idea of, oh, I'm so sorry. Let's come on. There we go. We're looking at this sort of six max. Oh, wait, hold on. Is the slide moving? I don't know if the slide is moving. There we go. Sorry. There we go. We also don't know how these dire wolves are going to react with their new ecosystem. Are they going to wreak havoc like the cane toad when humans tried to play God and introduce cane toads to Australia and then they took over? We don't know how the dire wolf or these genetically modified wolves are going to react in an ecosystem. We're also thinking about, this idea of the sixth mass extinction. Why don't we use this CRISPR technology to bring back species from the brink of extinction, things that are still around that just need a little extra help, So these are all things that we are going to talk about today. And another thing I brought up a little bit earlier is that the dire wolf actually got reclassified into a whole nother, genus and species. They found that they actually diverged from a common ancestor with gray wolves about 5.7 million years ago. That's, humans and chimpanzees diverged around 6 million years ago. So that just gives you an idea of their trajectory has been quite long away from gray wolves. And they're actually more closely related to, say, African jackals than the gray wolf. So that is also something to look at. And lastly, we're going to probably talk a little bit about species concept. What is a species? What does a species look like? There's multiple ways of looking at species concepts, and we're going to talk about that, especially when it comes to ecology, anthropology, biology. There's different ways to skin this proverbial cat, or in this case, dire wolf. So if you want to see a real dire wolf, I always tell folks, go to the La Brea tar pits. They've got 404 dire wolf skulls on that wall in the Page Museum. Go check them out because a lot of them got stuck in the tar because they were trying to get dying megafauna herbivores like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths. And so today I'm very excited to welcome my friend, Dr. Adam P. Johnson. He wrote this wonderful article. Oh no, you can keep going, Peter. There's a few more slides that I'm going to show. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a work in progress, folks. We're getting there. But this is his blog, Anthropology 365. He wrote an article last week because this is all in his wheelhouse. Not only is he an environmental anthropologist, but he's actually working to reintroduce Mexican gray wolves into Texas. So this is something that he's very familiar with. And this is Adam P. Johnson. I'm going to read a little bio on him because he's very impressive and I don't want to miss anything. So Adam P. Johnson is an environmental anthropologist. He completed a bachelor's degree in anthropology and philosophy at East Carolina University, a master's degree in anthropology at University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and a PhD. I'm going to show another slide because there's more fun slides here. That's him in a tree. I love this. And him with javelinas. University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and a PhD in anthropology at University of Texas at San Antonio. His previous research includes social boundary policing in drag queen community in rural North Carolina, time budgeting and allocare in captive chimpanzees at the North Carolina Zoo, female social relationships in rhesus macaques, science, racism, and inequality. He covers it all. He is currently an assistant professor at UTA and vice chair of the Texas Lobo Coalition. Lobo is just Spanish for wolf, folks. And you can donate to restoring Mexican wolves to Texas. Please go to his site if you would like to do so, and I encourage you to do so. His research focuses on the intersection of environmental precarity, human-wildlife relations, and socio-environmental justice. Please, people of the internet, welcome Dr. Adam P. Johnson. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Natalia. And hi, people of the internet.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Great. So Adam is a friend. We were just talking about the last time I think we saw each other was about 8 years ago at an anthropology conference. That's where the magic happens, right?
Yep. It's been a long time.
Well, I know it's been way too long. I mean, there was this a global pandemic. Can you believe that? But I want to talk to you a little bit about how you got into anthropology, because I always find people's stories of how they got to this wild field so interesting. What brought you here?
Yes, I started in biology originally because I wanted to study animals. That's what I was interested in. And in biology at the time, when I went to college in 2003, everything was like shifting over to molecular. And so all I was doing was basically taking classes on, molecular biology and genetics, endocrinology, and no one was really focused on organismal biology, trying to understand animals and animal behavior and ecosystems, ecology. So then I found psychology because it dealt like kind of with behavior, but I didn't like either of them. Biology, I didn't want to be stuck in a lab doing molecular stuff. Psychology, maybe a little bit racist, not my jam. So I had taken a couple of classes once I learned it existed in anthropology. And so I got interested in it. And so I shifted over studying under Linda Wolf, who is one of the co-inventors of ethnoprimatology, to be a biological anthropologist and do organismal biology and all the human stuff that I was interested in too. Anthropology made that possible.
Oh my God. And I love that Linda Wolf, because I have her book. I love ethnoprimatology, which is, the human, non-human primate interface and how, our evolution alongside each other has affected us greatly through the years. But I love the fact that her last name is Wolf now. And here you are working to reintroduce the Mexican gray wolf
Exactly.
to Texas. That's great. A full circle coincidental moment, I'm sure, but still.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about the research that you were doing with the allocare with chimpanzees, only because the primatologist in me just needs to know a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was in North Carolina. I was doing my undergraduate degree, and I kind of knew where I wanted to go. So I wanted to go into academia or research at some point. And so I was doing a project, supervised by Linda, and I had been going to the zoo my whole life growing up, and so I was already familiar with the chimpanzees there. So I was like, oh, I can do a project. It ended up turning into like more than a year-long project, but I was studying infant time budgeting. So how does mothering practices, there was 4 babies at the time, how do the different mothers approach to mothering shape like how the babies end up budgeting their time? And so it was like, at first I thought, oh, it was going to be like really age dependent, where the younger babies are going to be with their mothers the most, and the older they got more and more independent. But what I ended up finding was not really the case. It was really like the strategies that the mothers were engaging in. So there was there were 2 babies at the same age. One baby was always with her mom, Jeannie, and then her cousin, or her aunt actually, Gigi, same age, they're born like 2 months apart, was one of the most precocious of all the babies in the group. And so she spent a lot of time away. And then there was a much younger baby that was only like a year old, who spent a significant time, actually the second most amount of time, more than 20 meters away from their mother, which is how I arbitrarily defined it.
Oh, that's fascinating. Because I also wonder, like, if those mothers had subsequent kids with their kids, I mean, is it more the mother? Is it more the kid? Is it a little bit of column A, a little column B? Probably a little bit, column A and column B. But that's really, I love that. Yeah. So yeah, primates are my, obviously my jam. So very much appreciate that. So this Time magazine article, when you saw this, did you know this was happening, by the way, that they were trying to bring back the dire wolf, or did this hit
I'm
you like it hit everybody else?
Yeah, I didn't know they were bringing back the dire wolf. I know there's several projects, including stuff at Colossal, that was talking about de-extinction, and then the woolly mice thing that happened, came out a month or so ago, was interesting in that, like, you can go to PetSmart and buy a glowfish with jellyfish genes in it for $12 is interesting.
Yeah.
But it's work that's being done, and it's being done all over. So it's not that I didn't like anticipate something happening, but for it to be a dire wolf was really surprising. And so I had seen that they had put the Time, the cover of the Time magazine, which comes out next month, was getting shared around, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So I went and searched out a write-up of it, and to try to understand, like, how are they bringing back a dire wolf? Because I recently, within the past few years, learned, they reclassified them in their own genus. And I was like, seems kind of weird, right? They're going to bring back this extinct species. And it's very divergent from the rest of the canids. There's no admixture, to use science terms. There's no interbreeding between the dire wolf lineage and the other canids for however many, 5.7 million years. And I'm working with wolves now. And so the question was, okay, what's going on? And so I went and read the stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if this is accurate. And then all of a sudden it exploded. It was everywhere. And I had to write something on it because I don't know. I don't know if it made me angry. It made me incredibly frustrated. And of course I teach, I teach biological anthropology classes. I have students coming in and asking about it. And so it's like, it takes up so much time. And so then it ends up taking up so much of my headspace. And so I have to get it out.
Yep. You're like, make my brain think about, yes, get it out, on the paper. And it got shared widely. Cause I mean, I don't know if you know how many clicks or how many shares it got. I know it was far more popular than, and by the way, everybody, if you're watching this, please read Adam's blog. It's great. All of the articles, not just this particular one, but how far was the reach for this one?
In the first 36 hours, I think I had about 3,000 unique views to that article. So it's by far the fastest read article that I've ever written on there. There's some much older ones. I've been doing this for like 7 years. There's much older ones that are taught in classes, so they get just steady traffic. But this is by far the fastest growing one. I was pretty astounded. It was funny. My wife Sarah's a sociologist. We're having coffee, and it was like the morning after I had posted, and I hadn't looked at the numbers yet. And I was like irritated because I'm like, this is really important and it's really interesting, but nobody's going to read it. Everybody reads other personal stories on my website about personal experiences I had way more than they're going to read this. And this ended up kind of blowing this out of the water.
No, I'm glad it did, because the thing is, de-extinction has been on our radar for a while. Was it 2018? The beginning of 2018, I remember Barbara Streisand cloned her dog. And I was working on Star Talk, and I brought in, I believe, I don't know if Ryan Rahm was on that one. I don't know if you know Ryan. Ryan is at Lehman College. I used to teach there. He was the chair of my department, good friend, had him on. And then Ross McPhee, who does a lot of Pleistocene, more like Megatherium, like ground sloth work. He's a ground sloth guy. But we talked about de-extinction and what, the challenges are, the fact that, you can't really de-extinct something. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe misconceptions about genetics or de-extinction that people commonly get confused about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts, and I know you kind of foregrounded this early on, but it starts with even what is a species, right? And how do different, animals, different organisms relate to one another evolutionarily, right? We build these beautiful, phylogenetic trees that show evolutionary relationships. But I think the story that those phylogenetics trees tell to people that aren't versed in interpreting them is that there's these kind of steady lines in between the species and everything is really neat. That's not really what's going on.
Yeah.
And so when things are de-extinct, in this case, we're talking about a whole, genus that's extinct now. A whole, canid lineage is totally gone, totally wiped out. And and that creates, I think, problems for even talking about de-extincting a species when there is nothing closer related to it that even exists today.
Yeah, I remember talking to Ross McPhee about just the ground sloth, because people are like, why can't we bring back the giant ground sloth? And I'm like, think about it, folks. Just for 1 second, think about what the closest relative to a giant ground sloth is. It is a 2-toed or a 3-toed sloth about yay big. Are we going to make an embryo splice in the size? You know what I mean? And I could just see this poor little sloth growing until she pops, But like you said, there's not anything. Some of these species have nothing that are similar enough to potentially to gestate. And I think a lot of times understanding what species are and how, you and I have been to a lot of conferences, and we know that the arguments in terms of especially with paleoanthro meetings, which is, the study of human origins, where you get the lumpers versus the splitters in terms of trying to determine what is a species. It's almost like Matt Walsh, what is a woman? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's complicated. I mean, and that's, we know what they're trying to go for. We're not saying it in a conservative versus liberal way, but, species concepts are complicated, and ecologists will use different species concepts versus a biologist versus maybe a geneticist. So, I mean, when it comes to your research, do you have a concept that sort of makes most sense to you?
I kind of, it depends on the scale that I'm working at, right? So
Sure.
if I'm thinking genetically, so in the case with the dire wolves, that's where I'm going to start with, just because that's what they're operating with, just to, try to be on the same playing field. And so the issue then is, okay, so they've altered 20 genes total, 15 specifically to produce a phenotype, so a suite of traits that what resembles what they think the dire wolf looked like. And this is interesting, but we were talking before the show, like think about the relationship between humans and chimpanzees. You mentioned we share a common ancestor with them about 6 million years ago. Well, 2/3 of the protein coding parts of their DNA, the genes, are identical. A's for A's, T's for T's, C's for C's, G's for G's in humans and chimpanzees, which means only 1/3 differs. And that's in the protein, that's in the amino acids that are being produced. And they're 2/3 identical. But humans and chimpanzees are more than 2/3 different from one another, right? So why?
Yes.
What else is going on here? So it can't be in that 1/3.
Yeah.
So it's in these regulatory pathways. It's in how those proteins are being folded during protein production. When they're being translated. So there's all of these different things that is being missed from just putting some genes that kind of look like the genes from the dire wolves in there. So even at the genetic level, I don't think it works. And certainly that's the only level we can operate on, because like morphologically, okay, sure, you made them bigger and their ears more similar and stuff. Coat color, we have no idea why change them to white.
Yeah.
We don't know what they look like. And then ecologically, how are we going to ever test that? Because we know a little bit about dire wolf ecology, but these poor wolves are trapped in this holding facility forever. And so all we can operate on is either the morphological definition, which is what paleoanthropologists are using, or a genetic definition, and neither of which work.
Exactly. And the ecology thing is so interesting. Like they're keeping them in a 2,000 acre reserve essentially. And even the Time article addresses the fact that they're being fed pre-killed meals, right? And they're still pretty young, but they haven't seen any activity of them trying to hunt, and I just thought, wouldn't it be really funny if they were like Ferdinand the bull, just sitting in the grass, just like, what I mean? I have a feeling that they do have some killer instinct. However, it would be really interesting to see how they would fare. I'm not suggesting releasing them. I'm not. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about species concepts that are so complicated, is it does not boil down to just one thing. And like multiple things in life, there are multiple aspects at play, right? And it most likely will be many things that influences what does in fact make a species. So I think something to consider when we talk about de-extinction. And this is another thing that I think is fascinating, and it keeps coming up. It's a common theme in the show, is that I wish there was we had, Amanda Townley?
Yeah, oh yeah.
From she's wonderful. National Center of Science Education. Shout out to Amanda. We talked about just the idea of teaching students at a very young age that science is more of a verb rather than a noun. It's constantly changing. Good science is not static. As we gather more data, things are going to shift and change. And I think that's why we had such a breakdown during COVID, where people were like, wait a minute, Fauci said one thing one day and something else the next. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's how science works. It's not religion. It's not fixed. So, I mean, even like, for instance, the dire wolf getting reclassified a few years ago is really exciting, and being like, oh my God, for years, we always just assumed that it must be closely related to the thing that's already here in North America. So I think, gosh, if we could only reach folks at a younger age that way. I wanted to talk about like the actual gene editing, because they only, spliced in a few different traits. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that and why that does not make a absolute new species from start to finish?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about what like an organism is, right? It's partly, not entirely, but this suite of genomic information that then gets used by the cells in the body. And so any group of organisms, a population, is going to have variation within that, such as the point at which natural selection operates on. So for my thought about it is, well, all they've done is they basically introduced new variation into gray wolves that aren't in wild type gray wolves. And so now we just have gray wolves that are slightly bigger, and we already have gray wolves that are white. That's not an uncommon phenotype in gray wolves. And they change their ears a little bit. But like for the most part, these are all superficial phenotypic like changes that aren't being regulated by other, non-coding regions of DNA. There's just a lot that they've kind of left out of the equation of what makes an organism, just at the molecular level, not even going beyond that to think about, the stuff that happens during development and the stuff that happens kind of after they're born.
Yeah, and speaking after they're born, they had gray wolves gestate these particular embryos, and we were talking a little bit beforehand, some of the ethical issues with having these poor gray wolf mamas, have a baby and then, maybe yank them away too soon. I mean, if you want to speak a little bit about that, I know you know a lot about wolves, so you have any
Yeah, I
thoughts?
mean, wolves, canids, dogs are hyper social, especially, gray wolves. I think if you were to imagine social species, and if they weren't like bees or ants, which are by far the most social species, they give up sex to be social, right? Which is great. Not great for from my perspective, but great like evolutionarily. But like, you think of elephants, you think of humans, you might think of, gelada monkeys out on the, the savannah, in groups of hundreds, and even think of wolves, right? That's like one of the quintessential social species. And I think to disrupt that kind of inborn desire for sociality is problematic. And, I studied, mother offspring bond in chimpanzees, and, in primates, that is absolutely, central to all primate species. It's also true for wolves, that they have to learn to wolf. They have to learn to be the kind of thing that they are from their parents and from their social group, and that's not really happening.
So we might end up with Ferdinand the Bull.
We might. There's a meme like video that I keep seeing online of this like little like fledgling bird, and there's like a bug crawling on the ground, and the bird is just like opening its mouth at the worm, like get in there, because at no point has it had to feed itself. It's always just had the worm put in its mouth. And
jump in, little guy.
Yeah, you know what you're supposed to do. This is what happens.
Yeah. Well, it is fascinating, because we talk about being raised by wolves, right? Like we talk about, what were you raised by? I mean, I think a few people have asked me if I was raised by wolves, given my behavior. But that means that I behave nothing like a human. And, we talk about, I mean, I remember my favorite gorilla at the LA Zoo was named Caesar, because he was the first gorilla delivered by cesarean section and had no interest in getting down with the female gorillas. He loved the humans. I mean, I don't think he tried to get down with any human ladies, but he just didn't know how to gorilla, And so, I mean, I mean, would you say that this is one of the worst species to bring back from extinction, wolves?
Yeah, for lots of reasons. I mean, partly because they're incredibly social, and like what even is direwolf behavior or sociality? Like we know very little about both of those things because they've been extinct, for 20,000 years. It's not something that we can just go out and study. Like, you can go work on spider monkeys and understand, their behavioral ecology and the stuff that's driving their behavioral patterns. Same with javelinas or chimps or macaques for me. Yes. And then people hate wolves. I mean, their legislation in the US, they're trying to kill wolves. Like, what are we trying to bring back? One of the most hated species on the planet, according to ranchers and some politicians, while there are other, animals that are dropping, dead, going extinct in the sixth mass extinction.
Is there a species or a few species that you think of when we talk about bringing back species from the brink of extinction? Are there anything that you've read about, or you would like to see this gene editing used for good in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, for saving living species now, I mean, Colossal, to their credit, I guess they're trying to present this as a proof of concept, and they've also done some of this with red wolves, and that's interesting. And I'm from North Carolina, and we have the only wild population of red wolves anywhere on the planet. Maybe Texas near Galveston, they have the ghost wolf population. But having it done with red wolves, I think one of the areas that it probably would have a huge impact is in cheetahs. simply because they have so little genetic diversity within the species at the moment that is incredibly problematic. And their closest relatives are going to be pumas, mountain lions, cougars here in the United States. Could you find some variation from them to introduce into cheetahs? Maybe. And this technology is a pathway that could, technically could potentially take advantage of that.
Yeah, I also read that they were talking about the thylacine, and bringing that back would help preserve the quoll, which is, a species that is on the brink of extinction in Australia, or not doing so hot. I mean, how do you feel about using, like, say, for instance, when they talk about the woolly mammoth, using an endangered species like the Asian elephant to gestate?
Yeah, I mean, like with the woolly mammoth, I'm not so sure, mainly because it is like a hyper megafauna, right? It's the mega of the megafauna. Um,
Right.
but like, I guess with a parallel example, a passenger pigeon, I would totally be up for that. You've got band-tailed pigeons, I think, are their closest living relatives now, and they didn't diverge 5.7 million years ago, like with the dire wolves and the gray wolves. So I think that is a kind of um, a viable direction to go. On top of the fact that the ecosystem that the passenger pigeon helped co-produce still exists today, and actually it's hurting because there aren't passenger pigeons. Woolly mammoth, where are we going to stick them? In Siberia, up on the tundra? Like,
Yeah.
for how long?
I mean, that's
right?
basically right. They were trying to make the argument that that could actually help keep the permafrost, like by packing it down and stuff. But I still feel like there are other ways, like maybe less greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know. That is, call me crazy. I don't know if, I feel like that's a big leap to, a mammoth sized leap to make the jump that bringing back the woolly mammoth is what's going to save the environment, or, permafrost zombie viruses from waking up. I know we were talking briefly about just, the wolf introduction that you have been working on, and just some of these misconceptions about wolves being devastating to livestock. And I know that you had some great, facts that I would love to share with the audience.
Yeah, so like, with the dire wolves, bringing them back, why would we, when we've already got wolves here, and they're already like under immense threat globally, and especially in the United States, where they pretty much have been extirpated from most of the U.S. at this point. And so my work is work with the Texas Lowbow Coalition, and I'm the science side of that, trying to figure out like what are the political, the social, and the environmental barriers to getting Mexican wolves back here in Texas. And one of the biggest barriers is going to be from the ranching community in Texas. They're incredibly powerful. And this is true for many ranching states in Montana, for instance, Minnesota, where you have big ranching interests and they have a lot of political power in the state. And they don't want them here. And this idea is that the wolves are killing for pleasure, which there's no evidence that wolves kill for pleasure. Domestic dogs certainly do that. You can watch it happen, but there's no evidence that wolves do that. And I was just looking at data a couple of days ago from Montana, and there's like, I think the last time I checked, 2.5 million heads of cattle in the state of Montana. And in 1 year, 23 cows were killed by wolves in the state. Now that's like 1% of 1% of 1%, et cetera, of the population. It's not making the impact. And there are compensation funds. Basically, if you're a rancher, you lose cattle or sheep to a wolf, you get paid for fair market value for that wolf if they can, or for that cow if they can confirm it was a wolf kill. So it's not just that people are kind of out of the money that would potentially generate. But it's not making the big impact that I think people have in their heads. People think they're going to chase down predator, or chase down their pets, or chase down their kids. It's just the 2 people in the U.S. have been killed by wolves in the last 250 years that we have documented evidence of, and they're both in rural Alaska.
Wow.
Or I guess one was in Alaska,
Yeah.
One was in rural Canada, so in North America.
Yeah. Not even an American.
Yeah.
I think I like those chances. No, I mean, look, I don't know. I feel like I had a neighbor actually just a block away that I had 100% wolf. I would not endorse this. It was a half timber wolf, half tundra wolf hybrid, and one of the most loyal, loving creatures I've ever seen. Again, not endorsing wolves as pets, not doing that whatsoever. But I do think looking at the stats here are what really matters, rather than just what we see. I mean, do you think the media plays a role in vilifying the wolves?
Yeah, and I think it's historically that way too. So you think about like the Grimm brothers tales, right? Who's always the bad guy? It's always the big
Big
bad
bad
wolf,
wolf?
right? It's a wolf.
Yeah.
And I think that's just eked into people of European descent psyche, right? These old tales of wolves being like these villains that are lurking in the night. I think Peter and, Peter and the
Yeah.
wolf, all of that, right? The wolf is like stalking you and they're gonna kill you. So the media certainly historically has overblown it. And then there's really great studies in Europe where there are wolves, and there's one in Eastern Europe that looked at like people's views of wolves based on, one, their proximity to wolf country, so where there are wolves, and then two, how closely tied into communities that are circulating stories about wolves, like orally. And what they found was
Yeah.
urban people liked wolves, but they didn't have to put up with them. The rural people didn't like wolves if there were wolves around, if they were in communities with ranchers and stuff that shared like horror stories, like the
Horror
wolves
stories.
disemboweled my sheep. Like, yes, that is a horror story, and it certainly does happen. So it's like, I don't think it's a lie, but I do think it's overblown.
Yeah. No, and I can understand that. I mean, I feel like, again, I just think of, even like gorilla, King Kong being like known as the most, violent and aggressive creature and having this bad rap for years. And it's like, these are vegetarians that have no interest in ripping you asunder. I mean, I guess if you futz with their family, but yeah, oral tradition and being able, and being able to sort of critically think about what maybe you're hearing is important for something like this and for conservation. Knowing that, are there any tactics to deal with, I guess, rural communities who might have bad opinions about wolves?
It's hard, right? And that's why I was brought on to the Texas Lobo Coalition, because really they've been going in some iteration since 1990, and so they've obviously not been successful up to this point because, I mean, it's 2025. It's been 35 years, and we still don't have wolves in Texas. How do you navigate that with, not with kid gloves, because you don't want to like patronize them, but at the same time,
Yes.
like, you want to hear their concerns and then try to do things to address them or to mitigate their concerns, right? Because in some
Sure.
cases, I grew up on a farm in rural North Carolina, and we had cattle on our property, and I certainly got attached to some of the cows. So yes, for some, for the ranchers, these cattle are, capital. They're generating profit for
Yeah.
them, but simultaneously, they are oftentimes individuals that the ranchers come to get to know, unless they have, thousands of head of cattle, and then at that point they're just numbers. But having something that you cared for killed by something that you already maybe don't have the best thoughts about, I think exacerbates that issue. So just taking them seriously and trying to come up with strategies to help them mitigate both their concerns and the potential material consequences of having wolves. What happens if you have wolves? What do you do? Well, they're neophobic.
Yeah.
So you have to keep switching things up. You can't keep doing the same strategy all the time. They don't like new stuff.
Oh, interesting. You can't teach an old wolf new tricks, apparently. Apparently it extends. It extends. I like that. Like, what's an example? Like, just like maybe new lights or new, fencing. Does that just kind of freak them out?
Yeah, so one strategy that's been used around Yellowstone, is to put like bits of paper or cloth on fences that move, and they don't like that, but eventually they figure it out, and they're like,
Ah!
okay, you're not duping me, we're not idiots. So then they figure it out. So once they figure it out, then you have to do something else, right? So you have to keep changing it up and changing it up. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but I mean, if you want to live in a world with biodiversity, you got to work with what you got, right?
Yeah,
So you got
yeah.
to adapt alongside them.
I just want to like take an improv troupe up there, and they're like, "Oh no, we don't go there. There's improvers there. We don't like like the next week it's a windsock. The next week it's like a mime. I don't know. I just feel like I would love to know that if wolves had sort of opinions about bad art or weird art installations. I like that wolves have discernment. I mean, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
they? Oh, well, what are some benefits to, I mean, I know we've heard about Yellowstone, but if you want to kind of go through some of the benefits about reintroducing wolves, perhaps to Yellowstone, but also to Texas and
Yeah,
North
I mean,
Carolina, where you're from.
yeah, I would love them back in my home state. The kind of the oversimplistic story of Yellowstone is we extirpated wolves from Yellowstone, the deer population, ungulate population got so big, it started defoliating, which basically had these cascading ecological effects. So bringing the wolves back in basically meant that you're keeping that deer population under control to some degree. And wolves will they're never going to get dense population. You're never going to get wolves like you get coyotes or some, or squirrels, right? Poor Kevin. But
Poor Kevin.
Poor Kevin. But you never get wolves like that. They'll space themselves out. So they'll never be dense. And so they're keeping the deer population, which has had these cascading effects, largely in what we understand. Beavers came back in, partly contributed to by there being more trees and less competition for deer and stuff. This basically changes the river environment, which was caused flooding in the rivers again, because dam. And and then you get the nutrients from the river going out in the floodplain, and then now you get more foliage, which means it's going to support basically more biodiversity in that region. So that was Yellowstone. In Texas, there's lots of issues that people complain about, like coyotes. I love coyotes. If I wasn't working with wolves now, I'd be working with coyotes. But people complain about them, and they, there are a lot of them, and they are much more adaptable than wolves. They are in urban and suburban spaces. They're much more in close contact with humans in ways that gray wolves just don't. And part of the reason coyotes are so widespread now, including into North Carolina and the East Coast where they used to not be, in Texas, is because they don't have wolves, and wolves used to hunt and kill coyotes because they're competition. They eat them too, but they're competition for prey. Their niches overlap a little bit. So that would address part of it. We have a terrible in Texas and other places in the country. There's a prions disease called chronic wasting disease in deer, which is basically turns deer into zombies.
Wow.
That's a crude way to put it. That's what's happening. It's really scary, and it's prion, so it can infect other organisms. But when wolves kill and eat deer that have chronic wasting disease, they don't contract it, and then their poop basically sequesters it down. And the only things getting their poop are going to be like dung beetles and stuff like that, which aren't affected by the prion. So now the deer are going to go after the sick animals. You're going to remove these sick animals from the landscape, which is going to have, of course, positive benefits for the ecosystem. Also for hunting, people like to hunt deer. You don't want to hunt a deer that has chronic wasting disease. And so you're basically getting rid of those weak animals. So that's a huge benefit that wolves would have here. And just, you get more tourist dollars in places that have the wolves. So local communities are going to benefit from it. I think there are both social and economic benefits to it, but there's also ecological benefits that I think would make Texas awesome.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, just showing the benefits for, again, hunters who most likely I feel like the Venn diagram of ranchers and hunters, there is a hardy amount there that would be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to. Because can you tell, if the wasting disease turns the deer into zombie, like you can tell if a deer has the wasting disease. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
if it's progressed at all, you can tell. If it's, but it's a prion, so it's like Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome or something like that affects humans. Or a mad cow disease is another prion.
Got it. Okay. Hold on. I have a couple little things in the chat that I have to, let's see. We've got hail Natalia and Adam, and hail real conservation efforts. Fantastic. And then don't be paranoid of wolves. Like and share the stream instead. Please do like and share it. Do not be paranoid of wolves. Wolves are amazing. And so I know in your article that is on 365, you do talk a little bit about the reintroduction or bringing back the red wolf in North Carolina and some of the research that's going on with Colossal. Can you talk a little bit about what has been going on in North Carolina up to this point and what Colossal has proposed?
Yeah, so the reintroduction of gray wolves in North Carolina has been really this kind of national endeavor. I mean, they're like the Cincinnati Zoo, of course, North Carolina Zoo, which is where I grew up going and seeing them. Are lots of other zoos and sanctuaries and stuff are collaborating to basically build a reproducing population of red wolves in eastern North Carolina, and it's in Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. It's a mouthful, but I think that's what it's called. It's in eastern North Carolina. It's actually just like northeast from where I went to college. So when I was in college, we went up there backpacking, and I got to hear red wolves singing, and I cried because it was amazing.
Oh my
beautiful.
God.
it was very moving. And so what Colossal is basically trying to do is, um, uh, from my understanding, is basically improve the genetic variation within red wolf populations so that they don't basically get they don't basically get inbred.
Got it.
Which is like a way to use CRISPR, right? I'm not sure it's necessarily that relevant for red wolves because, from my understanding, from the red wolf SSP, they have a very diverse gene pool that
Well,
they're
that's
drawing
good.
from this reintroduction program.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think of, I mean, mountain lions here in, Southern California. We've had a massive problem with inbreeding depression here in the Los Angeles area. P22 was, a pretty healthy and lived a very long, even though there was a lot of folks that were heartbroken when he was put down, but he was considered, at 12 years old, a very old man cat, because usually mountain lions don't make it that long because they end up, getting forced out by another mountain lion. But yeah, I know that Florida had a lot of problems with inbreeding as well. So I mean, it would be interesting to see if they use their gene editing for that, because I feel like that, I know that they brought in Texas Panthers to get down with the Florida Panthers to create some sort of hybrid, and it has since been better. But I think, any help from gene editing would be welcome,
yeah.
considering they're also a great apex predator that gets vilified like the wolf, but generally does not mess with humans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing too with the with bringing in the Texas Panthers to meet with the Florida Panthers, like this is, it ends up creating this interesting paradox, right, around what is the species. There's this idea in conservation that we have to keep species like static. We have to like protect the genetic purity, whatever the hell that even means for a species.
Right.
But like all species throughout all time, right, there's gene flow that's happening between close related species. I mean, we wouldn't be how we were without gene flow from lots of different, hominins throughout our evolutionary history. And so I am definitely of the belief that that is a good thing to do, right? That you want to have as much genetic variation within a population as possible so that they have something like to it, so that they can adapt to these changing precarious times.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that when I was teaching, was talking about movement and how species move. Humans, our ancestors moved. Even this idea of invasive species, because I do think that's so fascinating too, is just at what point is a species no longer invasive, especially if we brought it there. Like if we introduced a Kate, like they didn't like get on a ship and go to Australia, let's invade, like these toads are just like, I guess we live here now. I guess we're going to eat everything. Cane toads are known for having lots of amplexus, which is sex, and making lots of other cane toads. And of course, cane toads are poisonous to dogs and things that like to eat them. So it's a big problem. But like even like St. Kitts with the green monkeys and the mongooses, I think about all these poor species that, are doing their best to just survive. And it's like, and humans are like, we got to kill them. We made this problem, but the only way to fix it is to cull, right? Or, and I think we're coming into an interesting time of how do we manage this? We maybe did a little too much hunting with the wolves. So do we bring them back? And how do we do that? That's not going to throw the whole ecosystem off kilter.
Yeah, in the U.S., in my book, I'm writing about javelinas, but like javelinas kind of look like pigs, so I have to talk about pigs. And the feral hog problem in the U.S. is a problem, and they're an invasive species, and they violate kind of what we think of as like the ideal Texas landscape, or what it should be, because it's destroying agricultural lands, and it's eroding. It's eroding creek beds and stuff like that. So it's, we create a problem, and then our response is, well, yeah, we brought you here, but now we're going to kill you.
It's so sad. I know animals get the short end of the stick all the time. Now we got to get back to the feral hogs and the javelinas, because I want to hear about your work with javelinas and, and this book, if you're willing to discuss it a little bit, because the sun's right up our alley.
Yeah, so I say I'm a reformed primatologist. Not that I don't love primates, because I still do, and I spent about a decade of my career studying primates. But I wanted to branch out, and I'm also trained as a cultural anthropologist. So I wanted to branch out, and so I was working with. I've gone to UTSA to do my PhD, and the plan was originally the plan was to go to Madagascar and work on injury vocalizations, largest living species of lemur, and how like climate change and swidden agriculture are like affecting how their the males and females sing together. And if you've never heard an injury sing, if you ever blow a balloon up and then you squeeze the air out of it, like that's what they sound like. But that didn't.
So true.
I didn't really want to go to Madagascar because I have now a 14-year-old daughter, and my partner, and so I was thinking about what else could I do? It would get me in a vaguely similar time zone, and so I met Ugo and Seri Lusitante, which are two Kofan members of the Kofan community. So the Kofan are an indigenous group from the Amazonian Ecuador and Colombia. They're from Ecuador, and they came in to the PhD with me. So we're in the same cohort. And they and Mike Sepek, who's worked with the Kofan for 30 years, was like, hey, why don't you come to Ecuador and work in one of the communities down there? And I was like, great. That sounds awesome. I'd love to. And then I thought I was going to work with woolly monkeys, which are really closely related to spider monkeys.
Yeah.
Because they have a whole festival around them in July where they kill and eat them. They can only kill 2 per household. I'm frozen. They can only kill 2 per household, and in July, and it's when they're the fattest.
Yeah. Which is hold on one second. I know you are frozen, but I don't. We can still hear you, which is paramount. There we go. I think you're back. There you are.
Back.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
But that's a great way to control. I mean, that's like sustainable hunting, right? Like
But there's more woolly monkeys. So the Kofan manage more than 1 million acres of land in northeastern Ecuador. There are more woolly monkeys in Kofan managed territories than everywhere else. So they're killing and eating them, but they're doing so. They have prohibitions that kind of like, this is a hunting area, this is a reproduction area, and you don't hunt in the reproduction area. And so they very much smart. They call themselves Sampimikarasundeku, which is like guardians of the forest. It's very much part of being Kofan is to be a guardian of the forest. And so I was like, I'm going to go down there and I'll work with them. I met with the former president, Randy Borman, of the community I was going to work in. And he I'll never forget what he said. He was like, you gringos come down here and you all study all the charismatic species. He said the harpy eagles and the monkeys and the jaguars and the anaconda. But like the most important animals to us in the world are the peccaries. So they have 2 species. The white-lipped peccaries they call munda, and the collared peccaries, the javelinas, they call sekira. And I was like, dude, I got you. So I was preparing to do that. I was headed down to Ecuador. I had a plane ticket bought. I had an agreement with the community. I presented it. The community voted unanimously, invited me down to the community to work. And then the pandemic hit, so I had to pivot. But we got peccaries in Texas, so I ended up working on peccaries in Texas. And I didn't know what it was going to be. And I thought it was just going to be studying hunting, which I didn't really want to do, but I was like, it's the PhD is that means to an end. It is not the end. I just need to get through this. And what I found, I went to this guy's house, Roger, who's awesome. He lives in New Mexico now. His ranch out in the hill country. He invited me out, and there's this herd of javelinas, and there's Roger and his dog, his golden retriever, Dobie, and they all just got along, and they were friends. And so the question was, how the hell do you get to this point where you have these animals that everybody's telling me are incredibly dangerous? And yet I'm watching this guy like hang out with them. And of course, the slide you put up earlier of me sitting with the javelinas just all around me. Those are just the wild javelinas on his ranch, just hanging out.
Wow.
And so that's what the book's about, is basically how do you produce conviviality? How do you produce a space in which humans and wildlife can get along, at least mitigate conflict and avoid it when possible? And so that it's under contract with UT Press, and it's due back to them on June 30th. So I'm well into the almost done writing it.
We're going to have you back on to talk just about that. That sounds perfect.
Yes, exciting. I'm very ready to be done writing it, though.
I know. I'm sure I'm sure that you are absolutely at your, last straw getting through the writing process. I know how it can be. I was going to say, though, can you give us any sneak peeks? Oh no. The internet can be very cruel.
I'm sure you can still hear me, but
I can still hear you. How is this, Peter? Peter is I think sound is more important than Peter. Okay. We can try to turn the
There we
camera
go.
back
Hi.
on. There we
It's
go.
done.
I know. I live across the street from Warner Brothers Studios and my internet still freezes and I'm just like, "How the heck?" And I have an Ethernet cable. No, but I was curious if you had any like little sneak peeks about, what is the formula of making this sort of, peaceful relationship between wildlife and humans and the environment and can you give us a little insight, or is that we got to wait for the book? That's fine too.
No, yeah, you have to wait for the book. Um, yeah, I mean, it's first off, I think about entering into a space in a particular headspace to just be ready to engage with it.
Mhm.
One of the things I write about in the book is like encounters with the folk javelina, or this idea that the stories that people carry into encounters with javelinas about what javelinas are, which is this kind of
Oh.
bloodthirsty critter that's going to come around and just destroy you. Um, and for that, there's great stories like Theodore Roosevelt talked about um, how much of a formidable foe they were. There's all this writing, about you better find a tree because if
Wow. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
again from people I interviewed throughout the study, so it's part of the.
Sorry, we lost you for a second. Back to Roosevelt and go up a tree.
Oh yeah, so Teddy Roosevelt wrote about them, and then I interviewed people, and of course, like reports on them about you have to have a tree nearby if you're out in javelina country, because if they find you, they're coming after you, and if you can't get up a tree, they will tear you to shreds. I've spent thousands of hours with javelinas at this point, and I have never felt scared of them or threatened by them because I can read their behavior. I know a little bit about behavior scientifically, but Roger, this
Yeah.
guy who owns the ranch, he doesn't have a scientific understanding of, javelina behavior, but he spent enough time with them that he's learned how to read it in the same way that you learn to read raisins behavior.
Yep. Yeah.
You just figure it out over time just through intimacy, right? So
Yeah.
when you're living when you have neighbors, you need to know who your neighbors are. Sometimes
Right.
those neighbors are the people that live in the house next door. Sometimes those neighbors are javelinas. Sometimes they're wolves, and you have to learn to live in a community with all of those different kinds of animals.
No, I think that's so great because I think that's one of the biggest, because if we think about it, and I think about this quite a bit about how we've evolved alongside animals for all these years, and it's like we've somehow forgotten that sometimes, you know what I mean? And then you see the people, remind me the name of the people you were working with in Ecuador, the Kofan.
Yep.
With the Kofan. Yeah, the Kofan being able to sustainably exploit the resource, which is woolly monkeys. And I've heard this for years about people because, obviously I'm vegetarian. I haven't eaten meat in a very long time. I have no interest in eating spider monkeys or woolly monkeys, but I have heard they are delicious, and how can and to one of the things as an anthropologist, and I think we were talking about this earlier, is how great anthropologists are because we really understand cultural relativism and that fact that just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it doesn't work for somebody else. And who am I to throw any shade or judgment? And also understanding how people in different areas of the world have been sustainably living in their environment for thousands of years, and doing it so well, So I think it's really neat that you were able to take a study that was going to be, in Ecuador, and of course, we all know what happened with 2020, and make it work here for the US and tell a story that I think is so beautiful and important right now because especially during COVID when, so many urban animal or sorry, wild animals or free-ranging animals came into the city because people weren't out and about so much. So we need to understand how to live with these animals, like our ancestors did,
Yeah, and that's the question, right? So if we want biodiversity, how do you create a world that encourages biodiversity? It's rethinking urban spaces. It's rethinking suburban spaces. How are we even designing a city? Because
Right.
concrete jungles ain't working. We got to do
No.
something else.
One of my favorite studies, and I always wanted to do, I mean, we always have these ideas to do like videos, and I'm like, I need a crew. But like there there was research about uptown and downtown rats, and they were genetically, dissimilar. Like they had they're very distinct, and that midtown because Midtown is such an urban jungle with not enough trash. It's too clean. It's not enough backyards, right? And so there was this like sort of weird dead zone, like the DMZ of rats, you know what I mean? And like but it was just so funny how like we've created these highways without even realizing, that kind of run between two areas. And I don't know. There's just so much interesting, I don't know, research coming out about how species have sort of evolved to get around us, and I think that the more we do that and the more we're better able to live in harmony with them, the better for everybody,
Yeah.
Oh,
And some
man.
animals are just better at it. Like, think about like a rhesus macaque versus
Oh.
like a green monkey, right? These are,
Right.
they're both, African monkeys or Asian African monkeys, catarines. But at the same time, like green monkeys are not going to live in an urban space. It's just not in their milieu. Whereas, rhesus macaques, like I think of them as an urban monkey.
They live anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yeah. Anywhere. I always, because I've done shows where they ask, is there going to be a Planet of the Apes? And I always tell them, well, we're actually living in it because humans are in fact great apes. But if there was going to be a primate that took over the world, it would be macaque attack.
Yep.
I mean, they already kind of have in many. I remember during COVID, there was a great image of, because the tourist population dipped in Thailand and all these temple monkeys that were so reliant on the tourists and they're, stealing their backpacks filled with snacks and Takis and Doritos, whatever, or just giving them, buying and giving them, food rations. They were just like becoming aggressive because they're like, where are our people giving us food, So yeah, a macaque attack is no joke. And I used to work at a sanctuary that had a young macaque that I was terrified. I mean, I loved her. She was amazing, but I was also, her name was Bindi. She was fantastic. But, because macaques are just so smart and so resilient and aggressive.
Yeah. I mean, I worked with them, and it was funny when I studied rhesus macaques in Central Florida. There's a free ranging wild population in Central Florida. They were introduced in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And so that's the group that I worked with, is interested in how is this species of primate adapting to these novel ecological conditions. And they're female philopatrics, so the females stay in their natal groups. So the female social relations are really strong. So that's looking at female social relations and as how the distribution of food and the ecosystem affected how much fighting they do. And it was funny that I was in Central Florida. It was in the summer. It was hot as hell, and I'm paddling out my kayak every day to go find the monkeys because they all fed out on the river basically, and they're eating ash trees, which is like the most common plant in the riparian environment. And every morning I'd get out and I'd find them at 6:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm in nothing but boxers because I'm out basically on the edge of the Ocala National Forest. There's nobody around. I didn't see anybody for like 2 months. And
it's probably hot as hell too, right?
It's hot as hell. And I just, I'd paddle out, I'd hang out between the two giant alligators where the monkeys like to feed. And every time one male would come out and the same male, and he would display at me every single day. And it got to the point after 2 months where I was like, F you, dude, go away. Like you are so irritating.
You go. That's so funny. Yeah. And those populations do have herpes B running through them, right?
Yeah. Linda Wolf told me a long time ago that just assume every rhesus macaque on the planet has herpes B.
That's a safe yes, I can get behind that. Yeah. And herpes B, for the folks at home, is different from, herpes simplex 1 and 2. It can kill you. Herpes B is deadly to humans. So I do have friends that used to do necropsies at Cayo Santiago, and they'd have to completely, do the hazmat suit in order to make sure that they were safe from any sort of exposure. Yeah. So do not touch monkey.
No. But here's the good news. If you live in Florida, even though they're shedding the virus, there have been anywhere in the world that I'm aware of, no wild transmissions of herpes B to humans. It's only happened in labs. Like people would be like, I'm going to stick a needle in you, and then they get squirted in the eye by blood. And then now they are exposed to herpes B. So stuff like that would happen.
Wow. Yeah. Do not do not do that either. But yeah, that's good to know, because you also, that's the thing. It's like one of those like fine lines you have to cross or walk when it comes to talking about wildlife, because you want to strike a healthy amount of fear where they keep away, but they're not shooting them to get rid, where they're like, well, I'm going to kill them all. It's like, yeah, just don't touch them. Just don't,
Exactly.
don't, it's not even about consent, because they might be like, let's do this, but nope, no, you don't want to, because that's another thing about primates is, and a lot of animals is oftentimes they don't, uh, they sometimes they want to get close to you, and that's also, it's always good to back away in a, not too quickly. Don't inspire a chase.
Yeah.
But wow, that you have had such a fascinating career. I didn't realize that you were doing, macaque research in Florida on top of all the other, I mean, javelinas and chimpanzees and wolves. Do you have, I feel like it's Sophie's choice, right? Like, I can't imagine you have a favorite type of, do you have a favorite animal? Is it safe to
Oh
say?
man, that's a good question. I don't know. I like my cat a lot, Aurelia. I don't know where she is. I don't know.
Aurelia, that's a great name.
Yeah, I like coyotes a lot. I love red wolves. I love chimpanzees. I just grew up at the North Carolina Zoo hanging out with chimpanzees, and I've got John and Kendall at the North Carolina Zoo that I got close with. They're two of the male chimpanzees
Aw.
there. That's just growing up and being around those kinds of animals. I love snakes. So in a previous life, when I was in high school and in undergrad and college, I did like reptile and amphibian demographics. So I would like go out to Raven Rock State Park, and I would collect like size and weight, or look to see if there's like a fungal infection on a toad or whatever, and send that data to the States. That's how I got started with like, ecology and stuff back in the day when I was still in high school. When there were still funds to, pay me a couple of, like $60 to send in some data in high
Right.
school.
I
Yeah,
know.
so
If only.
I love all animals. Mosquitoes are irritating, but male mosquitoes are pollinators. So I don't want to get rid of pollinators. I just don't want to be bitten by them.
Exactly. I know, and I know that there's a lot of, controversy about this idea of eradicating mosquitoes, because they're also a food source for animals too, and eating mosquito larvae and all that kind of stuff. So yes, everything, there is that sort of, I guess, butterfly effect. The trophic cascade will be affected when you yank out a specific species.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I was going to play a game, and I don't know if we can do this, but it was basically like the worst case scenario for dire wolves being reintroduced to the environment. Like what could, it's not so much of a game as like what could happen. I guess like out competing other, other animals. I don't, eating all the animals. Or being like Ferdinand the Bull and just getting eaten by all the animals. Who knows?
Yeah. La Brea tar pits is a great example. There seems to have been a fair number of them around.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So, like how social were they? I don't think we really, really know. I don't know. It's good. The worst case scenario for me is wherever you release them, there's just a bunch of hunters right outside of like the box you're releasing them from, and like 2,000 people shoot them all at once. That's like the worst case scenario in my head. But yeah, what are they going to
Humans.
outcompete is the question, right? So there's nothing
Right.
anymore, at least in the U.S. There's mountain lions. Are they really going to outcompete mountain lions? Maybe, but I doubt it. They just hunt differently, and I'm assuming that there's some niche partitioning that's happening there where they're hunting at different times of the day, and they might preferentially target different kinds of prey. But yet again, dire wolves are hunting like animals that just don't exist anymore.
The megafauna. Yeah, exactly. Like, are they going to go after like, rabbits and voles and things of that sort? Or, they're going to be like, damn, there's no, I know that they've talked about working to bring more bison back, because there's we don't have as much, bison as we used to have, but even that's pretty small. If they're used to like felling, Colombian mammoths, like they're going to be like, yawn next. Yeah. And I was going to say, I do know, and this is actually really fascinating, that at the La Brea tar pits, the social media manager from the La Brea tar pits just texted, hello, it's Diana Saldana, if you see this. But I did a video for them about the, it was dire wolves, but also saber-toothed cats. They found hip dysplasia that would have happened before they got to a certain age. So most likely, it looks like they were hunting actually in packs, kind of like what wolves would do. And even like dire wolves, they found a lot of injuries pre-death that would have meant they probably would have had to rely on others to help feed them and help, either wait for them, not let them, get killed by something else, who knows, an American lion. But yeah, so it looks like they were more social just based on these injuries. Cause that's, like one of the ways we can tell how good a species was to each other. If there was injuries, like, we look at, archaic human species or hominins, if we saw injuries and we see that they're still surviving past that, we know that somebody helped them out. Cause, you don't get over a broken femur or a hip problem overnight. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is, I love being able to sort of kind of put the pieces together like that to paint a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, hold on. I'm going to go back to my notes because I do want to see, let's see. Because I have so many, I mean, I could talk to you for hours and hours. That's the problem. I mean, I don't know if that is a problem actually. We did talk about species concepts, gestating. I don't know I guess, what is the filthiest thing you've ever done in the name of science? The show is called Survival of the Filthiest. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you've done some really interesting jobs. I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, filthiest, I don't know, living in a swamp for 2 months. I was pretty damn filthy. I bathed in the river, at a river called the Dead River at that. So that's pretty gross.
Were there alligators in the swamp?
Oh yeah, the spot the monkeys like to feed during the time I was out there. The space that came out most often was about 20 feet behind me. There was a 9-foot alligator, and about 40 or 50 feet the other direction was a 7-foot alligator, and I was nestled in the river, tied up to a branch in the middle of the river between these two alligators. Luckily, I understand alligator behavior, but there's one time that one of the females in the group was feeding on palmetto fronds. And so they eat the really meaty kind of white parts at the bottom, and then they just throw the rest of it away. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching one female, or I named them all after Star Wars characters because I'm a nerd.
Tell me.
So Organa, Leia Organa, right? So she was the only one that had 2 babies. She's also the highest ranking female in the group. So I was watching her, and she was sitting there. I actually have a picture of this. She's sitting there like nursing one baby, eating with the other baby kind of sitting right there. And all of a sudden I hear this splash behind me, and I'm like, the alligator's coming to get me finally. I'm just going to let it take me. There's nothing I can do about it. It's a 9-foot alligator. What had happened was the female that was eating in the tree, who I don't remember which one it was, but she was eating palmetto. She dropped it. It caught the wind and floated out in the river and hit the water behind me. It made a splash. It usually didn't. It just fell straight down like on the bank. And it scared the ever living hell out of me.
Shit.
But that was scary.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I would have soiled my chonies. That would have, wow. Yeah, because I mean, alligators. Yeah. So, what kind of behavior would have you looked for if what would have made you? Oh, they're coming for me.
So when I first started going out there and going down the Dead River, I'm in a kayak by myself, pretty far away from everything. And when I first came into contact with this big alligator, I was like, oh crap! Like I understood alligator behavior enough at that point, just from being interested in the kinds of stuff I am. And so what she would do when I first started coming out was, as soon as I would like cross the bend on the Ocala River going north to go into the Dead River, which is like goes to the northeast. She would like hit the water if she was on the bank, and then go into the reeds on the other side of the river. And then she would just hide there for a little bit. And then eventually she would pop back up. So I'd have to wait for her to pop back up. Usually I'd go down a little bit farther, so I was facing her. And then eventually she would kind of go do her own thing. She'd disappear like out onto the Ocala River. She'd go back up on the bank. And then it got to the point where I was coming out every day, and then she just stayed on the bank and she just kind of ignored me. So I habituated the alligator too. But usually it was like, are they like, are there any like assertive behaviors? Is she coming in my direction? Is she going down in the river and kind of waiting for me to get close, so like the ambush, or is she just trying to get away from me because I'm scary? And once I realized she was just trying to get away from me because I'm scary, and then once she realized that I'm not scary and that she could just ignore me and sun during the day, everything was good to
Yeah.
go. Yeah, so that was a little bit worrying at first, but it ended up working out.
God, and I love alligator. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I get it. I mean, I think, a healthy fear of, big reptiles, alligators, crocodile, but I'm just fascinated by them at the same time. I don't know if did you see the recent video of the American alligator and the American crocodile fighting on a sidewalk in the Everglades?
I didn't know. That sounds terrifying.
I'm going to send it to you. It is hilarious because because you can tell, I mean, they're two distinct species, and it's the only place they actually do meet is in Southern Florida.
Mhm.
And it is kind of a draw. You would think, one would kind of know, but it's actually, it was comical, but also it's like those simulated, beast fights, like would Godzilla or King Kong win? But anyways, oh gosh, you have had an amazing life. Well, what is next for you? I know that you have the book coming out, but the wolves and any other things on the horizon that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a trip I'm going to Kenya in July, which I'm really excited about. Not for work, for once I get to travel
Congratulations.
without going to work. Sarah and I, who Natalia knows, we're finally getting married in August. So that's really exciting. We've been
Oh my
together 9 years.
God. Congrats.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. Yeah, so I mean that's like the kind of immediate personal stuff. Professionally, like I've got this wolf project. I'm starting a new job at UT Arlington in the fall, and so I'm excited about that. And I'll probably do a urban ecology, urban human environment study in the Dallas Fort Worth area during that time. Get some students involved. So I'm really excited about that.
Yes. Oh, I gotta just real quickly. So my unfinished journey also said was the one that said "Hail Natalia" and "Hail Adam" and real conservation efforts. But we got John Hogan who asked, "Are Nile crocodiles more violent?"
Notoriously so. I mean,
Yes,
I think
I've heard.
saltwater are often the ones that are accused, but Nile crocodiles are notorious for being pretty aggressive too.
Yeah, I play. Do you ever play the game? And I'm not. I think I'm probably the one of the only people, but I don't know. I do the whole. Would I rather dive with a saltwater crocodile or a great white shark? And it's always great white shark.
Yep, that's my position as well.
Yes, yes. I love both of them. I think they're so fascinating, but both of them, yeah, I know plenty. I have friends that dive with great white sharks that seem to do fine, but I don't think I know anybody who's done any diving with a saltwater crocodile.
Yeah,
I'm so excited about Kenya. Oh my goodness. So what is the animal that you're most excited to see?
Oh, good question. So although we probably so there's I'll do the two. I'll do the one more realistic and the one of my favorite animals in the world are African painted dogs or African wild dogs, whatever. I love them. I think they're fantastic. If I could study them, I would. I would just be friends with them if I could. I don't want to keep them as pets. Wildlife are not pets, but I would love to hang out with them in the same way that I've hung out with other animals as colleagues in knowledge production. But I'm really excited to see all of the dung beetles. Probably realistic more than anything else because there's so many different species and they're all so cool and they have cool headgear that they use to fight and they've got really cool behavior. So I'm really stoked about them, which means I have to see the elephants too because that's they're going after the elephant poop.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to oh my God, this I want to watch this show, honestly. I just want to see the dung beetle. Like I feel like there needs to be sort of like an American Gladiator show about dung beetles, about like, and next up is Steven. Check out this headwear. He specializes. Oh my God. That's going to be so much fun. But African Peyton dogs, they're do they have them at the Brookfield Zoo? I feel like in Chicago. I feel like they have
Oh man, I haven't been to
do they
the
have them in
zoo.
North Carolina?
They don't. They
They're
have
so
the last
beautiful.
time I saw them might have been at the Oakland Zoo. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen them in a zoo.
Okay. Well, I'm very excited. You've got a lot of things. You're getting married. You're going to Kenya. Stay away from the Nile crocodiles.
Yeah,
I don't
luckily
think
we'll be in Kenya and not
you're
near
gonna
the
be far.
Nile. But
Yeah, I was
we'll
gonna
be
say you're
staying
gonna be
with
way too far.
we'll be staying with the Samburu. So there's like lots of lions and elephants and giraffes and all sorts of ungulates and stuff out there. So I'm pretty excited about all the biodiversity that I'm going to get to see.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. That's gonna be a wonderful trip. Yeah. Oh man. Is your kiddo going with you?
Yeah, it's actually me, my wife Sarah, Amelie, my daughter, Sarah's parents, her sister, her daughter, her brother, his wife, and their two daughters. So there's
Oh
going to
my
be a lot of
God.
us. Yeah,
It's a whole wolf pack you're taking.
yeah.
That's going to be a great time. Oh, I'm very excited. Yes, please post all the photos. And I'm excited to see, because I have a feeling there's going to be some really great blogs that come out of this trip. But I want you to have fun.
I inevitably
It's
am
not
gonna.
work.
It's not work. It's fun that will turn into work later on when I get back.
I know you well enough to know that I feel like you're going to come up with something so brilliant and beautiful that, yes. Yeah. So I think I'm looking at the time, because I also know that you've got a life, but I think that's everything. I mean, I guess last thing I want to say is, what can we as humans learn from animals and human animal interaction?
Pay attention to them, watch them, notice them, learn about the things you live around so that you can make informed decisions about how you live your own life in the world that is also theirs. And vote for policy and candidates that advocate for policy that benefits everybody, not just a small group of people, especially not just a small group of humans.
This is true. And are any of your research grants being affected right now?
No, luckily I didn't have anything. Although I was starting to write grants for the wolf stuff and that. Now I'll put it on hold for the time being. But nothing was out there yet.
I know. Are they going to have to call them American? Instead of Gulf of Mexico, they're going to have to be American gray wolves now. They're going to have to rename them.
Oh, jeez.
Goodness knows. I know. It's so ridiculous. Mexican gray wolves. No. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's a time where I feel like science is having to fight the good fight, and you're doing an amazing job.
Yeah, it's a rough time for us scientists and science communicators. I mean, you're doing this every week, and I mean, you kind of putting your neck out there a little bit with these topics. So
I'm trying.
It's admirable.
Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you. I might try to come to the AAAs this year. We might have to do that. So, and is there any place? I think we have some links to your Blue Sky. Is there any? And your blog, is there anything else that you would like to plug? Feel free to.
No, just my book, Living with Javelinas. It should probably be out next year with UT Press. That's the only other thing in the pipeline.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Adam P. Johnson.
Thanks,
I have to say your full name just like that. That's how I have to.
Patrick. It's the P is for Patrick.
Is it for Patrick? I was going to ask you. I was like, is it Poseidon? Like, what's going on? Is it, is it Philadelphia? Philip? I don't know.
Patrick. I have a boring name, so I have to throw in the middle initial.
I feel like it's good. It's nice. It sounds mysterious.
Like every other mysterious Adam Johnson.
There you go. I don't know. You could be AP Bio, AP Johnson. It works. I think it's good. Well, thank you so much. And hello to both Sarah and Amelie. And I hope to see you very soon. So, and I just want to let folks know that next week I'm going to have on, I have to double check. I believe I'm having on Andrea Jones-Roy, a data scientist who's also a political scientist and a circus performer, which is a lot of things rolled into one. And we'll be talking about just data science and how important it is now more than ever understanding what data means and what it doesn't mean, because it has been unfortunately analyzed incorrectly and sending wrong messages to folks. So, and thank you so much for joining another episode of Survival of the Filthiest. And until next week, folks, please stay extra filthy. And big thanks to my producer, Peter DeTucker. What? Oh yeah, no. Oh yeah, no, I'm not. Oh no, I'm not. I'm not done yet. It's okay. Thank you. I'm going to thank them in a second. I have to say, if you want to join, if you like this, please like, subscribe, and share with friends and family. And if you want to join my Patreon page, you can do that. And I'm going to give a shout, and you'll get a shout out like you're going to get in 2 seconds by my wonderful Patreon patrons. So we've got, I'm ready. Are you going to do the scroll of the patrons? There we go. Sorry. We're it's a work in progress. We've got Daniel Wynn, Claude Allen, Simply Tom, Skullbeard, Tori Yates, gotta say it like a pirate, Redding Maley, Dana Logan, Michael Z. Weinstock, David Leitner, James Hudspeth, Anthony Zana, Tom Berman, Jen Beverstock, Scott Froschauer, that means frog beater, JSB, Jeff Cohen, Andrea Bloom, Jonathan Marks. We got to give a shout out to Jonathan Marks, who also worked with AP Johnson. So shout out to Jonathan Marks and Kelly Frazier. Woo! Thank you so much, everybody. Until next time, stay filthy, have fun, and be safe. Mwah.